In about an hour's time, the US Labour Department is expected to announce that more than 200,000 people found jobs last month, and that would point to the best 4 months of new employment in 6 years, even if unemployment remains unchanged at 8.6%. Well, the key for President Obama is whether this improvement is sustainable, indeed whether the jobs themselves are built to last. As the presidential election looms, are Americans adjusting to the major economic shocks of recent years? Well, joining me now from our New York studio is Bruce Piasecki, a specialist in sustainability issues, also author of a book on wealth called Doing More with Less. Bruce Piasecki, thanks very much for joining us. You talk about the United States being a land of diminished expectation these days. Do you think Americans are coming to terms with their new position?
David, it's a great question, and I believe we have a kind of self-awareness now and a self-consciousness about how much resources in the world we use, while at the same time we also have an awareness of how much wealth creation comes from those numbers.
Well, I just wonder how you square that then with the, I understand there's more oil being pumped out of the US than for many years out of the ground there. President Obama saying we're drilling all over the place right now, and that's still very much the old-fashioned sort of gas-guzzling American message ahead of an election, isn't it?
Well, I think that there are at least 60 million of the many 300+ million Americans that have developed this doing more with less is success mantra. I also think that those that are from the more dominant or emerging culture are fighting a fight that will change quite rapidly. And so we are coming back to a kind of American pragmatism where the virtues of frugality, like in a Ben Franklin sense, not cheapness, but frugality, competitive frugality, inventiveness in a Ben Franklin way of thinking about public libraries and lightning, and also diplomacy instead of warlike. And I now believe that 1 out of 5 Americans have this view.
At the expense of the consumerist image, which is something which obviously, certainly for the last century, Americans have grown up with and come to expect.
Well, I do think that what's so fascinating, David, about the American way is that it's a semi-osmotic membrane, and many of the people that I get to work with in the multinationals I advise understand that this membrane called America is going both ways. It's a globalized economy. And as you can see in the work of other people who think about globalization, the key thing to worry about is how do you change products, lifestyle, and government policy so that you realign money, people, and rules to allow this liberation of frugality.
Right. Who is driving that then? Because many people would suggest that it's certainly not the politicians.
I think the politicians have been lost in a kind of ideological wheel spinning of extremes. I do think there's a permanent face to government which has set up some executive orders of frugality and executive orders of doing more with less that are part of the bureaucratic culture. I think there are 3 drivers, and the most exciting one is the spirit of the people, these LOHAS 60 million plus, who have a lifestyle and an intellect and a global perspective of being world citizens. I actually now believe, David, that the supercharged superhero of this new book of mine, Ben Franklin, is more a world citizen, although most of the world still thinks of him as an American. The number of British clubs he has, the way that he looked at the world. I think there are many, many, many more Ben Franklins in the world, and we're beginning to discover.
Okay, you see lessons clearly that we can learn for the future to be taken from the past, but at what point do you think, very briefly, the United States could be seen by the rest of the world as perhaps the sustainability leaders, the country once again leading the way in the future? Well, I would get an answer out of Bruce, but he appears to have got a frozen screen there right at the last, so I'm afraid we're going to have to leave that. But that's Bruce Piasecki, author and expert on sustainability issues.